Now, it has been a while since we featured any Hoka trail shoes on the channel, and it was actually around 10 months ago when I laced up their very much hyped carbon plated Tecton X3. Now, I actually enjoyed running in that shoe, especially considering it had a carbon plate worked into the midsole, and I'm not really a massive fan of that in my trail shoes, but we are back with a bang today, and we're going to be talking all about their new Mafate 5. Now, I would say this has been a bit of a controversial update, and not everybody has been getting on with the new features and construction, but I can say there was a lot of hype surrounding this shoe at UTMB this year, and Hoka had put up a very impressive display in the Race Expo, and there was a lot of people walking around town and running on the trails in these shoes. So without further ado, let's give you the lowdown on the new Hoka trail shoe, and then I'm going to be lacing them up and taking them out for their first run. Thanks for tuning in again, folks. It's always appreciated. I'm Lloyd Purvis and you are watching Run4Adventure. Now, if it's your first time here at the channel, then thanks for joining us. And we are obviously a running related YouTube channel based down in the beautiful county of Cornwall in the UK. I've been running most of my life, whether it's chasing PBs on the road or just trying to survive a challenging, tough mountain ultra. And I worked in the running industry for around 10 years. So running has definitely been a big part of my life, and if I can't do it, I'm like a bear with a sore head, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to that. But let's get back to the shoes in question, the new Mafate 5 from Hoka, and let's start off with some stats first. So it looks like a pretty big update this time round for the popular Hoka trail model, and there's lots of new stuff going on when it comes to the design, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But first up, the all-important price point, and the Mafate 5 retails here in the UK for a pretty pricey £170. Now, I don't know whether it's just me, but does that seem like quite a big step up in price compared to previous models? Another thing that surprised me when I popped them on the scales, my pair in a UK 10 came in at a pretty hefty 340 grams. So again, quite a big weight increase compared to the Mafate Speed 4s. And then midsole construction, we've got the dual density thing going on, and it runs off a 44mm stack height on the heel and a 36mm under the forefoot. So again, big changes there, giving the Mafate 5 a 8mm heel offset compared to the 5mm that you got on the Mafate Speed 4s. Now, I personally think maybe not the best move by Hoka, putting a higher heel offset on their trail shoes, but I guess we'll find out when we run them later. Construction up next, and there's a lot of new tech going on here as well. So we've got a wrap knit upper with an anti-fray treatment, and I've got to say it, the fabric does feel and look like it's going to be nice and breathable, and it should hold up to those tough trail miles well. The upper's also got a lot of structural overlays on it, so starting at the heel, working all the way along the midfoot, around all the lace eyelets, and then finishing up wrapping around the toe box. So that should help when it comes to a nice secure midfoot hold and durability. And I'm happy to say that Hoka have worked in a substantial toe bumper into the construction for some nice upfront trail protection. There's a good level of support and padding around the ankle collar and in the heel cup, so that should offer a nice plush lockdown. But the tongue design in the Mafate 5 does come as a bit of a surprise. So first up, it's not actually gusseted inside the upper, and I always think that's got to be the best option when it comes to a tongue in a trail running shoe. And secondly, it is very thin, so pretty much zero padding where you pull those laces down nice and tight, and it is very short in length. So I got all my fingers crossed that this thin tongue design isn't going to cause me any comfort issues today. And then finishing up, when it comes to the upper construction, we've got a pretty massive reflective heel tab on the back end of the shoe. I'm not sure it needed to be this big, but that's been put in place just to make it a bit easy to get in and out of the shoes. And we've also got the addition of a handy gaiter attachment at the base of the heel. But moving down to the midsole, we've got a pretty complicated construction going on here. So first up, it is a dual density midsole with a top layer of supercritical foam. And by dual density, I mean, if I push into the heel section here, you can see that's nice and soft, so that's been designed to soak up sort of more impact when we're running downhill and loading heavier through our heels. And then we've got a slightly firmer midsole under the forefoot to give you that more planted, stable feel when you're running on more technical trails. But the innovation doesn't stop there, because Hoka have also worked in their Rocket Integrity technology into that midsole, or as I like to call it, their RIT. Now, that's just because it's a lot easier to remember and I'm not going to forget it, but that's in the form of a TPU plate that's sandwiched between the two layers of foam under the forefoot. And if I hold the shoe close to the camera, you can actually see that plate pushing through the midsole on the lateral and the medial side. Now, this isn't your normal sort of plate that you're going to find in a performance trail shoe for sort of propulsion and energy return. This is all about keeping the integrity of that meta rocker. Now, most Hoka running shoes come with a rocker geometry worked into the midsole, and the Mafate 5 is no exception. So this has got quite an aggressive rocker in it, and like I said, that plate is hopefully going to reinforce that rocker and stop it running flat over time. And last but not least, the all-important outsole design, and this is where we probably see the least amount of changes with the new Mafate 5. So happy to report we still get the super sticky Vibram Mega Grip rubber on the bottom with this nice chunky multi-directional 5mm lug pattern. So levels of grip and traction should be pretty good in most terrains and most underfoot conditions. And there you have it, the all new Mafate 5 from Hoka. Now, like I was saying at the beginning of the video, as far as it comes to the feedback that I've been hearing, it has been a bit split. I've been hearing lots of positive stuff, but also the odd negative along the way. So I think it's about time we find out what I think about the fit, feel and performance of this new trail shoe. So let's get them laced up, let's hit the trails and take them for a spin. So we have come back to the beautiful Tahiti Woods for today's test run. Now, if it's your first time at one of our first impressions videos, this is a place I come a lot because it really is an awesome ground to come and bring a trail running shoe for the first time. A big mix of different terrain and underfoot conditions. So we've got compacted trail, gravelly trail, we might even get some mud today, and obviously we're in the woods, so we've got lots of sort of tricky technical rooted sections as well. So it really is the perfect place to bring a trail shoe for the first time. So far, 2 miles into the run, first thing I want to talk about is fit. Now, the last couple of Hoka shoes that I've tested out, I've gone with my usual UK 9.5 and they've always felt a little bit small. So I went up to a UK 10 this time and it's perfect on length. So I would say they do size a little bit small, maybe going up half a size is the best option because like I said before, on any of the long runs in a UK 9.5, I was getting a little bit of toe rub by the end of the run. I've also got a really nice lockdown around my midfoot and a good hold in the heel. I know we're only 2 miles in, but so far so good when it comes to that thin under padded tongue. It's not causing me any issues with the laces pulling through it or anything like that. So far so good when it comes to fit and comfort of the upper, but we're gonna try and get a good 7 to 8 miles in today. So let's crack on, let's get this test run done.
Without getting anything done. Oh, oh, oh.
Well, it's awesome to be back into Hiddy Woods for today's test run, but it is a lot drier than I was expecting, so there's not going to be a lot of mud on today's run to test out that outsole. Okay, happy to report that the run is still going well, and we've just ticked past 6.5 miles and definitely feeling even better today. The lungs are even freer, and I've been sort of running at around 8:15 to 8:30 minute miling. Still feels pretty tough when I hit any big hills, but on the flats it feels pretty good today. So I think on the road trip, living in the mountains at over 1,000 meters and getting all that training in has really helped when it comes to my overall fitness. As far as the Mafate 5 goes, I had two main concerns before we left for the run. One was that thin tongue. Well, I'm happy to report it still feels nice and comfortable across the top of my foot. I can't feel those laces pulling in, and even though it is short, it feels fine. And the other one was the weight of the shoe, because at 340 grams in a UK 10, it did seem pretty heavy, but it's one of those shoes that once you get it on your feet, it's actually pretty well balanced, so it runs lighter than it actually is. And if I had to guess and I didn't know the weight, I would have said it's more around 300 grams than 340. But like I said, we've already clocked up 6.5 miles. It's probably going to be another mile till we get back to the adventure bus. So let's get back to the studio and let's wrap up this first impressions video with a quick conclusion. Well, I've got to be honest, that test run went a lot better than I was expecting, and it was great to be back into Hiddy because it's been some time since I last ran in there. Now, I actually clocked up 7.5 miles by the end of the run in the new Mafate 5 straight out of the box with no issue. So that's always a positive thing. And like I mentioned earlier, I had been hearing a fair bit of negative feedback actually from runners out at UTMB who had tried the shoes, and I really didn't know what to expect on today's test run. And I think again that just highlights how personal running shoe choice is. I spoke about it out on the run, but I'll mention it again just in case you missed it, and I did find that they size a bit small, so I would definitely recommend going up at least half a size, especially if you're planning on running long distances in the new Mafate. That way you'll just get that little bit of breathing space in the toe. And actually, speaking of the toe box, I found on today's run that I had plenty of wiggle room up front. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a super wide trail shoe, but I think for a Hoka shoe, it does have pretty good width and volume in the toe, especially when you compare it against some of their other models. So we talked all about upper fit and comfort out on the run, so now it's time to break down the performance of this dual density midsole. And I've got to say it, I was pleasantly surprised with the ride quality that I got out there today on the trails, and hands down for me, way more comfortable when I compare it to that very disappointing midsole on the Speedgoat 6. You know, that shoe just felt way too stiff and rigid, and the foam felt really firm underfoot, and you know, to the point where I did one test run in them and then I got rid of them, which is a real shame. You know, I just didn't want to run in them again. But I've got a lot of history in the Speedgoat model, and especially in the Speedgoat 3s, which is actually one of my favourite trail running shoes of all time. The midsole on these feels a lot more cushioned than the Speedgoat 6, especially this soft heel section, which actually worked well on today's run for me. So basically, I'm still having a few foot issues. So I mentioned it before on the channel, I think they're sort of plantar fascia related. So what tends to happen is my heel feels a bit tender for the first few miles. Now, I am managing it, I'm doing all the exercises, I'm rolling my foot quite often, and it is getting better each day, but still a little bit tender. So it was great having this nice softly cushioned heel section to soak up a bit more impact, especially when I was running downhill. Obviously, we've got Hoka's RIT worked into that midsole setup as well. So like I mentioned, that's in the form of a TPU plate that sits under the forefoot there. Now, this isn't a performance plate like we find in some trail shoes. This is all about reinforcing that meta rocker, but I actually think it also maybe offers the shoe a bit more underfoot stability when you're running on more technical trails. And I also think it doubles up as a bit of a rock plate. So having that plate in the forefoot just gives you a bit more underfoot protection when you're running on more rockier trails. But the downside is it also adds a bit of stiffness and weight to the shoe. So I'm not sure it's actually needed there, and maybe the Mafate 5 would actually run and feel a bit better without it. There was some light smatterings of mud along the way, but nothing super crazy to really test out the outsole on the Mafate 5s. But you know, it performed well on the run, no loss of grip or traction at any point. And that's kind of what I'd expect from a Vibram Mega Grip rubber outsole with this nice chunky 5mm multi-directional lug pattern. So all in all, really enjoyed my first run, and the shoes performed way better than I was expecting. But there are a few things that maybe could be slightly tweaked in the future. As far as my trail shoes, or pretty much all my running shoes go, I tend to stick with a 4 to 6mm heel offset, because that seems to be a sweet spot for me, especially if I'm going to be running long distances in the shoes. So the fact that Hoka have chosen to go a bit higher on the offset this time around with an 8mm drop, you know, that is a little bit high for me. And not that it was super dominant, but I definitely noticed that extra height. And you know, for me, I think it would have been better if they'd have stuck with that 5mm heel offset off the Mafate Speed 4. I mentioned that the thin tongue design actually felt pretty comfortable out on the run, and I was a bit worried about that beforehand, but I shouldn't have done. I had no issues with the laces pulling through the tongue. However, I still would like to see a little bit more padding there. Not too much, but maybe a bit of zonal padding down the center, just to offer the top of my foot a little bit more comfort and padding, especially on a longer run. And when it comes to the weight, even though they felt pretty well balanced and they ran a lot lighter than they actually are, I'd still like to see maybe 20 or 30 grams of weight stripped from the overall weight of the shoe, because I just think that would up performance and they'd feel even better to run in. And I'd actually say the new Mafate does feel quite different when it comes to performance when you compare it to the Mafate Speed 4. And I'd actually say they sit somewhere between the Mafate Speed 4 and a pair of Hoka Challenger ATRs. Obviously, these are just my initial thoughts after today's first run, but I'll definitely be lacing these up again soon and taking them out for a longer effort once I'm fully recovered, because I really want to test out this upper for comfort a bit more thoroughly over distance, just to make sure that that thin, short tongue design doesn't cause me any issues. But on that note, it brings today's first impressions video to an end. Really hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you found it helpful in some way, and it'd be awesome to hear from you guys. So if you've had a pair of the new Mafate 5s for a while and you've clocked up some decent mileage, let me know how you're getting on with the shoe in the comments below. I've got to say a big thanks to Joe from Hoka for sorting us out a pair of the new Mafates to test and review here at the channel. It really is appreciated. And obviously a big thanks to you guys for watching and supporting. If you have enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back on the channel very soon with some more interesting and exciting running content. And as always, stay safe and keep on running. Pretty massive reflective heel tab on the back end of the shoe. Not sure it has to be that big, but that's pim pum pum. But the innovation doesn't stop there, because this midsole also has Hoka's Rocker Integrity Rocker Integrity Technology. Rocker Integrity Technology. Got it, Lloyd. Come on, we can do this.